All right, class, let's get going. We're recording. You can see me, you can hear me. Good. Let me share my screen. All right, chapter 16 and 17. Talk about community involvement, community engagement, all that kind of good stuff. So what is community involvement? What is community engagement? It's the business community can talk. I mean, we kind of hit on all these things a lot about stakeholders, about the importance of being engaged with the community, uh, why that is important, more important now than it has been in the past. But the business community can and must play a vital role in addressing complex societal problems. It's not just a companies out there just simply just thinking about profitability, how to buy something for $1 and sell it for two, and how to increase their bottom line. They have more of a responsibility, more of a role. It's clear that writing a check or donating a product alone doesn't have that same lasting impact that it used to. It has to be direct, legit involvement. And a growing body of evidence demonstrates that when a company engages with partners in an area in which the company has a deep expertise and a vested interest, society benefits and the company enhances its own performances. So you can have both. You can have profitability and you can be doing something very impactful. Volunteer programs. Volunteer programs used to be something that kind of not frowned upon. Actually, that's a bad way to say it, frowned upon. But it was just something that people just kind of did on their own, was outside of the scope of work or the purpose or the strategy of the business. But now it's very important. It's strongly encouraged. So there's something called the CEFP, the Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose. Recent data shows that 89% of their companies offer paid release time for volunteer programs, and 29% of employees participated in volunteer work, which I think is great. And then there's something called paid release time, which most companies offer this type of service program where you can actually get, it's usually not a lot of time, usually like a day, where you can actually get paid for that day to do some type of volunteer work. Some even have company-wide day of service. A company will mobilize volunteers for that day and or rally around generally one particular cause. Philanthropy. What the heck is philanthropy? That's just goodwill to members of the human race. Very kind of lofty definition, and or an active effort to promote human welfare, doing well for others. There's also strategic philanthropy. That is philanthropy, doing well for others, that will benefit both society and the corporation. So there's a strategic way to do philanthropy that is going to benefit the corporation either with, because essentially, I mean, if you're donating money, you can write that money off, but something that's going to strategically benefit the corporation and give back as well. Why do companies give? Well, there's an obvious one that's not really on there. It can be a tax write-off. You can basically kind of, it's like, you ever go to a grocery store and it says, hey, would you like to, donate, extra $1 or $2, whatever it is, for whatever cause it is. You give the money, or you as a customer give the money. The store collects the money, and then the store basically donates the money that was not theirs, but they can use it as a total, as a write-off. Meaning, at the end of the year, let's say they owe $100,000 in taxes, but they collect $100,000 in these donations. Then at the end of the year, they don't have to pay any taxes because other people donate it. So that's one of the very obvious ones. But why do companies give? It's charitable, community giving, for which there is little or no expected benefit for the business. That's just, hey, we're doing good for good sake. Community investment gives that support long-term strategic business goals while also meeting a critical community need. Keep the community thriving and going. And there's a commercial, giving that benefits the business wherein the benefit is its primary motivation. That's it. And the CECP, which was the Chief Executive Corporate Purpose, their annual report showed that an increase in community investment giving and a decrease in charitable giving. What does that mean? That is companies, as you give more back to the community, sometimes you give less to random charities. Cause-related marketing. That's just the direct linking of a business's product, service, or brand to a specific charity, a specified charity. You see that a lot more, where you have a company, well, it's sometimes you would think it have nothing to do with the company, but they have a specific charity or specific cause attached to the business. Cause branding. That's just, the cause branding represents a longer term commitment than cause marketing. Cause marketing can be essentially just kind of like a short um, uh, project, initiative kind of a thing. But cause branding, it's almost like a Tom's shoes, which, like, everybody knows when you buy a pair of shoes from Tom's, you're giving a pair of shoes back to somebody in need. That's kind of cause branding, where it's actually kind of ingrained and embedded in actually the operational structure of the company. Offshoring, what does that happen? Offshoring is terrible. Refers to when relocation of a business processes to a different country. So let's say you're in the middle, you're in Ohio, and you got a factory or a plant there that's making some kind of widgets, and all of a sudden they said, nope, we're going to move this factory to Vietnam, and then that's it. It's gone. The factory's gone, the jobs are lost, and now it's going to be the same products that were made there on the supply side is going to be in offshore. I mean, it goes to someplace off the shores of the U.S. Then there's reshoring. What is that? That's when the returning of business processes to their original locations. It rarely happens, but it can happen. Where sometimes that will happen because you already have the facilities. You have the facilities, you have the equipment already in place, and because of kind of powers, or there's some kind of bigger things that are out of your control, that it became cost prohibitive to manufacture in certain areas because of tax breaks or the lack of tax breaks. Companies can come back when it's a more attractive place to conduct business. After the decision is made after the decision to close is made, what happens? Now, most of these kind of things I'm talking about are larger scale. This is not going to be essentially kind of a mom and pop type of shop that's going to close. These are going to be larger companies, larger manufacturing facilities where you're employing thousands of people at a time, tens of thousands of people. And if it closes, a factory or a manufacturing facility or just a business in general, it's going to have a huge impact on the local economy. So the community impact analysis on whether to close down or move, the following questions are asked. What groups will be affected? What groups are going to be affected? Aside from the people, I mean, clearly it's going to be the people in the community. It's going to have all that kind of that downstream negative impact when you close down a large employer in that area. Yes, those people are going to lose their jobs. Also, the businesses in that area will not be able to have a much harder time to survive and to stay afloat, because all these people don't have jobs anymore. These people might have to move. So what groups will be affected? How will they be affected? What is the timing of initial and later effects? So there's going to be probably some just kind of instant effects and then later kind of like effects. What is the magnitude of the effect? What is the duration of the impact? How long will this last? And to what extent will the impact be diffused by the community? Advance notice. So if you have, kind of like I just explained, like, kind of larger scenarios where companies will leave, there's something called WARN. It's kind of a ominous name there. The Worker Adjusted and Retraining Notification Act. It should be WARNA, but it's all right. The process of giving employees and the community 60 days warning that a business is leaving or closing. Like I said, there are size and impact of the community consideration. So it can't just be, it's like you have a privately owned, retail shop or service related company, or that it's different with that. So they have transfer, relocation, and outplacement benefits. What would those be? There's something called gradual phase outs, because sometimes you just don't do it all at once. You do kind of do it gradually, and then helping to attract replacement industry. Who can potentially come in and replace that company in that space? The Easter egg for today is Eric Dickerson. I'm a Rams fan. He was my favorite player of all time. So once again, it's Eric Dickerson is the Easter egg. Interaction of business, government, and the public. Government business relation. Generally, lobbying is the main form. Is usually the main form of the interaction between government and business. Then there's that public government relationship. Usually the political process is the main form, by the people putting together bills and doing elections and trying to use kind of, our individuals / collective voice to make a change in that public government relation. And then the business public relationship, the main place this relationship occurs through the marketplace through special interest groups like the ACLU, the AARP, and many other organizations. Other non-regulatory government influences on businesses. Government, they do have a significant impact on business in many ways, including the government can be a major employer of business. The government can be a large purchaser of goods and services, the largest purchaser of goods and services in the country. They're a big source of debt. They can help finance these things. As a provider of subsidies and transfer payments, that's huge for the government's involvement. As a competitor of the business, so you could have something, you can have a business, but then who's your competition might be the government. As an entity that levies taxes, that's a huge impact, our influence on businesses. As a financier linked to the monetary policy, because when you get into government, we get more into the kind of macroeconomics and monetary policy, they can determine interest rates. They can determine how money is distributed. And then as a persuader of business as well. Regulation. What is regulation? We're going to talk about regulation, deregulation, some boogeyman type of scenarios here, but regulation just refers to the act of governing, directing according to a rule, or bringing under the control of law or constituted authority. So sometimes you're going to think regulation is needed, and we're probably kind of getting ahead of myself here. But if you want clean water, clean air, you want to make sure that certain content is available to watch on your television, and that's being regulated. That's when you need regulation, essentially. So who is going to oversee that? Who's going to look at that and monitor that to make sure that there's kind of an even playing field, or there's certain expectations that will be met? So the Federal Registry, it's very difficult to find a definition for regulation, but the Federal Register described regulation as a regulation has decision-making authority. Actually, even like regulation of how gas stations operate, how they can, what type of gas will come out of there, how this and how that impacts the air, how the cleanness of air. And regulations can be, how cigarettes are taxed, and those are all done by regulation, and what type of things can and cannot be sold in stores. That's all based on regulation. Regulations also is now you see a lot of stores, or restaurants, depending upon the size, will have the calorie or health information on the menus. That was because that was a regulatory process, a regulatory measure. So the Federal Register describes regulation as has decision-making authority, establishes standards or guidelines conferring benefits and imposing restrictions on business conduct, operates principally in the sphere of domestic business activity. So regulations generally are just, in domestic, just for our purposes, our impact here in the U.S., but there are, kind of larger overarching regulatory agencies, like in world sports, like FIFA would be like an international regulatory agency related to soccer. It has its head and or members appointed by the president. The president of the United States will appoint who's in charge of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and has its legal procedures generally governed by the Administrative Procedures Act. So reasons for regulation. For the most part, government regulations has arisen because of market failures. Something has happened, something has failed, something has possibly puts people in danger, and think there's got to be a better way. There has to be a fair, even, and equitable way to monitor industries, organizations, processes, products in the marketplace. Four major reasons or justifications for regulations are typically offered. One, controlling natural monopolies. You don't want companies, industries to have too much power, essentially, because when they have too much power, then the consumers are going to be the ones who suffer. Two, controlling negative externalities. would be when essentially like profit motives. We'll get into profit motives a little bit here. So when you have companies, the push and pull, or the reasons for and reasons against regulation. Reason for regulation would be keep everything fair, keep everything there's certain standards that we have to have. Reasons against, people are going to say who are against regulations, because when you have larger companies that come into it, this is not my personal opinion, this is just, what the criticism is, when there is a profit motive involved with an industry, then the goal is to be profitable for your shareholders. So your shareholders are people who own, because when you go and do corporate finance, first thing to tell you is that you have a legal obligation to your shareholders, not to the end users or the customers. So when there's a profit motive there, what's going to happen is that will you be thinking, where's your focus going to be to satisfy shareholders, or to satisfy the end users? And if it's to satisfy shareholders, then the end users might suffer with the result of the quality of the product. However, the counterpoint to that is that if you don't put out a quality product, and if you are just thinking about profitability, the power of capitalism, the beauty of capitalism, is that consumers can easily go to the next best option, to the competition. So there's kind of a give and take with that. So, and the third point here is achieving social goals, and then just general other reasons. Type of regulations. Economic regulations can control and influence economic or market variables such as prices, entry to and exit from the markets, and the types of services offered. 2, social regulations focuses on a business's impact on people, generally through product dangers, safety, health laws. We talked about that. Employment conditions, pollution laws, talked a little bit about that, etc. Some examples: responding to natural disasters, keeping the country safe from terrorism. It's a huge regulation. It's kind of like a social regulation, kind of a social contract we have here, is that our government is going to keep us safe from terror and from somebody trying to attack us. That's where you have certain types of regulations, safety regulations, and then ensuring safe food and medicine, and maintaining our infrastructure here in the country. Issues related to regulation is that if we're overly regulated, then innovation might be affected. So if somebody has say something, I don't want to give to me, like you had a new communications tool or app that could really positively impact society and the world. However, there are so many rules and so many regulations that would prevent you from doing this because of freedom of speech, because of the type of information that you can put out there, that might stifle or hinder innovation. Second one is new investments in plant and equipment may be affected. So if there are regulations in certain areas or certain industries, would you actually, or would a company actually make the investment in a manufacturing plant or the equipment, knowing that there's too many regulations? The reality is a lot of companies are moving out of the state of California because they say that California is overly regulated, and those regulatory measures end up leading to paying higher amounts in taxes, which is going to affect their profitability and their bottom line. So what do? They go to states with less regulations, like Texas is a common one. And the third point here, small businesses may be adversely affected. So when you think about that, small businesses may be adversely affected. Imagine, you got some, hot dog stand or something like that. You want to open that up, but you cannot open up one in a certain area, or you have to have all these permits, and it just ends up being more work than it's worth. Deregulation, regulatory reform aims to keep the economy in balance. So deregulation, let's take away all the rules. Let's just turn it over to, no, I shouldn't take away, that's bad. That was not. Let's say you limit the amount of rules and regulations so that you can encourage more competition. And that will hopefully keep the economy in balance. And the purpose of deregulation is to increase competition with expected benefits of greater efficiency, lower prices, and enhanced innovation. So let's say, for example, you have a hot dog stand. kind of example here. You want to open up a hot dog stand, but in the city they said, oh, sorry, you can't. There's only 2 hot dog stands that we're going to allow in this certain area, and for each hot dog stand you have to pay a certain amount of money. Here's the kind of rules that you have to have for the hot dog stand, which is there for your safety. Make sure the food is stored and kept in a certain way, and it's so you have all these rules. But then let's say there's no regulation. Then what happens? There's no regulation. Anybody can do it. Everybody can do it. Would that potentially lead to an unsafe situation for some of the people selling it? Yes. However, they said kind of Adam Smith, the invisible hand of the market would determine who the winners are. Because if it's almost like whenever you go travel someplace in a different country and you're going to buy some street food, where should you go? You should go to the stand that has the most amount of people there, essentially, because they have proven themselves in that area to be good quality food. It's safe, it's reliable. And I don't know what the rules are, the regulations are there for what you need to operate, but let the competition determine who's essentially going to win instead of things being overly regulated. Those are kind of more the purposes of regulation and deregulation. With that, we are done.